I think one of the reasons I get so emotional when I watch that is I'm mindful of the women here today who can't have children or have lost their children. And also because of the amazing role that mothers have placed in our lives. So, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Sorry. All right, here we go. A few years ago, a prominent Christian psychologist noticed a trend among women, particularly mothers, in evangelical Christian churches. And it was depression. He was just struck by how many women he had met who were mothers who were depressed. Like, if motherhood is awesome, then why would he see depression? He didn't understand the correlation. So in order to find out why this was, he conducted a survey that was taken by over 50,000 mothers across the country. And what he did is he made a list of 10 possible causes of depression. Okay, take a look at the screen here. Conflict with in-laws could have been a reason for depression. Low self-esteem, fatigue and time pressure, absence of romantic love in my marriage, problems with children, financial difficulties, loneliness and isolation, sexual problems in marriage, menstrual and physiological problems, and aging. Just take 10 seconds really fast. Lean to the person next to you, and what do you think the number one cause of depression was among this list? Lean to the person next to you and figure out what that was. Over 50,000 people respond to that. Number one, fatigue and time pressure. Low self-esteem was really, really close, fatigue and time pressure. Now, would you have ranked it that for you? Or maybe at some point in your life you would have. Fatigue and time pressure. What I want to do is I want to talk about that particular issue as it relates to motherhood. I heard a story about a young mother who decided to go to the movies with her husband one night, and as always, they couldn't find a babysitter, so they decided to take their 3-month-old baby with them and sneak him into the movie. Well, the usher caught him at the door and said, "Now listen, if you take that baby in there and the baby starts crying, we're going to have to ask you to leave, but we'll give you your money back." So about halfway through the movie, the wife turns to her husband and says, "This movie is terrible." And the husband leaned back and said, "Pinch the baby." Right? Now, young mothers have virtually no time to themselves. There are children in tow, and I used to think that it would get easier when children get older, but it doesn't. The time pressure put on moms of teenagers is unbelievable. And for those of you that have children leave, you can attest that when they leave, you just simply exchange fatigue for worry. The emotions essentially are the same and they never change. The question is what causes depression, and it's simple. The fatigue and the time pressure never stops. There's never a break to it. It's constant. And what I want to do is I just very briefly want to look at one verse in the Bible. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Now, if there's one description that I think is an accurate depiction of what goes on in the life of a mom, it would be weariness and being burdened. Now, it's interesting. The word weary is a present participle in Greek. It implies a continuous state of mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion. And if there's ever a word that would describe what it's like to have to rear one or many children, it would be weariness. Now, the other word that he uses is burdened. And it's the word of loading on. And it describes oftentimes, let's say, a camel that was used in the first century where people would put cargo on it and overload it to the point where it could barely move. And the reason this was so powerful in the first century is that Jesus was a rabbi, he was a teacher, and people came to him to learn how to live a life that was pleasing to God and was fulfilling. The other rabbis in the first century, of whom there were many, taught that there were 613 laws that every person needed to obey. 613. I mean, I couldn't remember 10, let alone 613. So that's what these rabbis would teach. People would come to them, and they would teach them how to memorize, and more importantly, how to obey 613 separate commands from the Bible. People came to Jesus, and what Jesus told them is, if you're weary and burdened, I'll give you rest. Now, what's interesting about what Jesus said is that the word rest, we often think of it as sitting by a poolside, drinking a margarita, having a beautiful, not that I drink, but, having a beautiful, tranquil, sunny day, not a care in the world. Jimmy Buffett is on the radio. My life is tranquil and perfect, and that's not at all what Jesus is promising. What Jesus is promising is that for the people who feel weary and burdened, I will clothesline you. The Greek word that he uses is anapao. It means to force someone to stop, to come to a stop, to pause, to cease, to restrain. And the image is you're lollygagging and running through a crowd of people, and then someone sticks out their arm and drops you on your back. And that's bam, and that's Jesus' promise to those of you who are weary and burdened. I will flatten you. Now that's quite a promise, because many of you have literally been flattened. You give Jesus the reins to your life, and he allows you to get flattened on your back, literally, through illness and sickness or whatever. But metaphorically, what he's saying is that if you come to me and allow me to lead your life, number one, I am not going to cause you to become weary and burdened. You're getting that elsewhere. But more importantly, if you come to me and allow me to lead your life, I will show you how to eliminate that. Now, in his book, The Life You've Always Wanted, John Ortberg writes, not long after moving to Chicago, we became the teaching pastor of a large, growing church. He called up a mentor of his, Dallas Willard, and he said, what do I need to do to be spiritually healthy? Isn't that a great question? Dallas Willard began to think. Ortberg had his pen out, and Willard said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Another long pause. Ortberg said, okay, I've got that written down. I told him a little impatiently. That's a good one. Now what else? What do I need to do? Give me all the nuggets of wisdom that I need. Long pause. There is nothing else. And then Ortberg said he's the wisest spiritual mentor I have known. While he doesn't know every detail about every grain of sin in my life, he knows quite a bit. And from an immense quiver of spiritual wisdom, he drew only one arrow. There is nothing else. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Now, I think that applies to all of us in this room, particularly those for whom this day celebrates. And if we were to summarize one thing that the Bible says, if the spiritual wisdom of the Bible it percolates up and gives us wisdom, how do you actually do this? How do you actually, if you're weary and burdened, how do you do that? It would be here. Be fully present in the moment. It's interesting, anxiety comes from two Greek words, a divided mind, and I think fatigue and stress and all of that emanates from we're here, but we're not really here. Like right now, literally, everyone stop and look at me, everyone. Be honest, raise your hand if you weren't actually listening to me. Now, come on, we're in church. You can lie. I guarantee you more than half of you, right? I mean, you were actually, auditorially, you were hearing the words that were coming into your ears, right? But there were other places that you went, other things that you were thinking of. It's just who we are as human beings, and we're in this place right now. And what happens is, parenthood is a lot like that, right? There's so much stuff going on, so many balls in the air, the plates are spinning and dropping everywhere, that I'm here, but I'm not really here, right? I'm either in the past, thinking about things that I can't change, in the future, things that I'm worried about, or so many things going on in the present that I'm actually not here. And you're never going to get that moment back. You're never going to get that season back. And what allows us to choose the things that we're going to focus on and be fully content, allowing hundreds of plates drop and crash around us, is I'm going to choose just to be here and focus. Now, the burden is not just on mothers. The burden is also on all of us. Oftentimes when I ask mothers, what could people do? Not that we're actually asking, but if we hypothetically we're asking, what could we do to help out? And what would you ask? There would be two things. Number one, I hear, take the initiative to help out. Like it's just as much stress on me to remind you, right, that there's been milk coagulating in your bowl from cereal from 5 days ago, right? It takes just as much energy to remind you and be on you and nag you to get all of this stuff done. Take the initiative to do that. It's interesting, George Barna, in his book, The Future of the American Family, said, working women, when their paid employment and household duties are jointly considered, work about 15 hours per week more than their husbands. And to that, we simply say, too bad. No, right? Over the course of the year, that adds up to more than 1 full month of 24-hour days of work. The second thing is simply value what I'm doing. Be appreciative of my task. Now, to me, one of the most hollow things is to say, I really appreciate you, Happy Mother's Day, right? Because the whole planet is telling you to be appreciative. I think one of the best words of advice I ever received on showing appreciation to someone is to pay attention to something that no one else notices about them and be very, very specific about the thing that you like. So in the middle of February, when no one on the planet is thinking about Mother's Day, you're in the car and you bring up something that she does well that you've noticed that no one else notices, and you thank her for that and what that means to you. That's huge. Now, everything that I just said is all well and good. It's all really good advice, but let's be completely and totally honest and transparent this morning. Everything that I said is not going to change one single thing about your life, is it? Not one thing. You're not going to leave here today and say, oh, I was so thankful that I was there for Mother's Day at Christ Church of the Valley in 2014. Because my life now is like one tranquil beach on Turks and Caicos every day. I am so centered and peaceful. It's not going to make one bit of difference. And so really, I think the most important thing I can tell you, for those of you who are weary and burdened, and so those of you who are tired and you feel the pressure, are three simple words, and it's worth it. That's all I got.